I'm Alan Spears with Occupy Democrats, and in some stunning breaking news, we have just learned from a top conservative near the Trump campaign that Donald Trump may actually have a devastating surprise for J.D. Vance come this October. Now, as you are probably well aware at this point, RFK Jr. has officially decided to withdraw from the presidential race and has endorsed Donald Trump. Now, this endorsement by RFK Jr. isn't exactly the most surprising news, as many of the policies and ideas that RFK Jr. has ran on fall closer in line to Trump than they do with Harris. Additionally, we've known for some time now that RFK Jr. had reached out to the Harris campaign to try to put some feelers out to see that if he did ultimately endorse Harris, would there be a position within Harris's cabinet for him, or would he be able to help or be some sort of influential figurehead within the campaign? And suffice it to say, they rejected that notion.
I think Trump wants to win, and anybody who could give him votes is somebody he's going to embrace. And RFK, I think, in addition to being weird, is also opportunistic. He contacted the Harris administration to see if there was a place for him in their administration. He's clearly hoping that he can get something if Trump wins. He's a really interesting character. The Harris administration wants nothing to do with him. And if we talk about voters, it's because most of the left-leaning voters who were likely to vote for Kennedy have already gravitated over to Harris. Mm-hmm. So the ones that are left are either people who aren't going to vote because they truly are independents, or they're already Trump-leaning, and that's where they're going to go.
And with that fact in mind, it really doesn't come as that much of a surprise that since he failed with Harris, RFK Jr. would try his luck with Trump. Now, what came as a little bit of a surprise is the fact that RFK Jr.'s ultimate withdrawal from the race and endorsement of Donald Trump has really not helped Trump's campaign that much, and we haven't really seen too much of a shift in all of the major national polls. While Trump may have received a 1 to 2 point boost in certain areas of the country, it's important to remember that Harris is leading Donald Trump by far more than just 1 to 2 points. In some states, Harris is leading by double digits. And while Donald Trump's popularity among his base has remained pretty stable for the most part, something that hasn't really been lending itself too well is his choice of running mate, J.D. Vance. And that is what brings us into our breaking story today. Now, it is old news and pretty well known at this point that J.D. Vance is one of, if not the single most unpopular pick as a running mate in our country's history. His weird interactions with people across the country and his horrendous view on women's rights and their bodily autonomy have done a good amount of damage to Trump's campaign. And in our breaking story today from this top conservative, that should have J.D. Vance absolutely terrified, especially as we get nearer to the election. Now, in a breaking article from rawstory.com, we have learned that Donald Trump may have a card up his sleeve for an October surprise, and J.D. Vance should be worried, a conservative columnist said Saturday. During an appearance on MSNBC over the weekend, columnist Jennifer Rubin, a loyal conservative until Donald Trump came along, it's a pretty typical story, was asked about the impact Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s recent Trump endorsement might have on the presidential race. Specifically, the host said, "You can see there, before Vice President Harris took over the top of the ticket with Kennedy in the race, Trump was leading President Biden. Now, with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket, she's leading Trump with Kennedy in the race. With him out of the race, just a two-way race, she gets a bump." Now, in response to this fact, Rubin replied, quote, "The more people know about Bobby Kennedy, the more people who are saying they do not want to vote for him." She went on to say, "I think he's a perfect match for Donald Trump. In fact, if I were J.D. Vance, I would stick by the phone because he might be just the kind of guy that Trump would pull in as an October surprise." She went on to say that Kennedy is freaking in every sense of the word. And again, this isn't really too surprising, but it is somewhat hilarious to see Trump's campaign imploding and that the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is possibly more detrimental than it was a boon. We've seen RFK Jr. be in the spotlight of controversy for a number of years now, whether it's having barbecue dog meat or finding and picking up a bear carcass. These are just a few of the well-known bizarre highlights that is RFK Jr. But really, this doesn't come as too much of a surprise that Trump may ultimately decide to pull the old switcheroo in October and replace Vance with Kennedy, because Trump's getting desperate. The closer we get to the election and the more Trump is falling in the polls, he's going to continue to start lashing out. He's going to get increasingly more vitriolic, and he's going to be more desperate, trying all manner of different strategies to try to boost himself nationally. And considering the fact that J.D. Vance has been nothing but dead weight, if not an outright detriment to Trump's campaign, well, come October, it won't surprise me if Trump decides to fire him. Truthfully, though, it is an absolute delight to see Trump and his campaign completely imploding as he thrashes about and tries desperately to find any semblance of lead or foothold against Harris, and he's simply going to fail. It really does seem that Americans are beginning to fully reject the hateful and bigoted rhetoric of Donald Trump and choosing to embrace a message of joy that Harris and Walz have unquestionably brought to this campaign. I frankly don't believe it's going to matter whether or not it is Trump and Vance or Trump and Kennedy. Trump himself is on the decline, and suffice it to say,